Brewing for Bozzos! Like to brew from those who haven't got a clue.
Welcome to Brewing for Bozzos, the channel where a couple with limited knowledge about brewing talk through our process of how we created half-decent beers with basic equipment. If you find this useful, please hit the subscribe button for more videos and recipes, hit the bell icon for all notifications, and the thumbs up button as this will help grow the channel. Brewing Basics. We oversized monkeys have been brewing for thousands of years, from the Indian rice drink of sura to the Romans with grape wine, from the rice wine known as sake in Japan to the Vikings and their mead. We have enjoyed the odd tipple over the years. Here in Britain, after the Romans up and left, we ended up brewing for ourselves. We eventually came up with ale, which was brewed in people's homes. A grain-based drink flavoured with ingredients such as nettle, sage, juniper or mint. This changed around the 1500s with the introduction of hops. Hops were initially added to increase the shelf life, as it were, so that the ale could be stored in barrels and taken on long sea voyages, since the boiling of the hops removed any bacteria. Hops could be added to the beer not only to flavour it, but also adapt the taste of it. It also caused a great many arguments at the time, but that's for a later video. So how is it done? Well, this is where our brewing journey started. My partner and I reasoned that, since people had been producing beer for hundreds of years, how difficult could it be? Turns out, not difficult at all. That is, if you don't mind your beer tasting like the U-bend in a public toilet. So we set about learning the basics, just enough to make our beer taste remotely like beer and then improve our technique. This is a very basic walkthrough that could see us lynched by those who have been brewing for years. Having said that, I welcome discussion and the opportunity to learn. We are always looking to improve our knowledge and better our booze. Absolute basics. Beer, ale and lager are made from four main ingredients: grain, hops, yeast and water. The percentage of each gives the various flavours. Grain. Grain holds your sugar. This is the element that will eventually provide you with alcohol. The more grain you have, the higher the booze content. I will explain more about this when we get into the process, as it isn't quite as simple as that, but that's the general gist of it. Hops. Hops provide you with bitterness, flavour and aroma. By adding hops at different stages of the brewing process, you create different flavours and smells. By mixing different varieties of hops and in different quantities, you can create an abundance of flavours. Yeast. Yeast is the microorganism that eats the sugar and converts it into alcohol. And the final ingredient, water, because without it, all you've got is Marmite. Equipment. For this, you will need a fermenting barrel, a large saucepan, a small saucepan, a mash tun. All the mash tun is a cool box with a filter at the bottom that is attached to a tap. This allows us to pour our grain in, fill it with water, let the grain soak or seep, and then we can drain off the sugar water from it afterwards. A jug, a hydrometer, discussed in the next episode, a thermometer, Campden tablets, discussed in the next episode, sterilizing agent, a wooden or metal spoon, and a kettle. and not to mention the hop. Rule 1. Sterilise before the grain unless you want it down the drain. There is nothing more disheartening than spending money and a full day of brewing only for it to turn into sewerage water and stink your house out. You only make this mistake once, believe me. We use this brand of steriliser, but most tend to work in the same way. Follow the instructions on the back of the packet and you can't really go wrong. First, we make sure that each piece of equipment is fully washed with washing up liquid by hand so that there is definitely no residue from the previous brew left over. Second, we make up our steriliser and fully coat the inside of the mash tun, fermenter and all the utensils that will be used. Once they are coated, we leave them for 10 minutes before fully washing them with cold water. Third, which is probably overkill, but as previously stated, I'd rather shave my legs and change my name to Shirley than go through the heartache of a ruined batch of beer again. We boil the kettle and pour it over every surface again just to make sure. Note: don't pour your boiling water over your hydrometer. All you'll end up with is a kitchen floor covered in broken glass. Now you're ready to rock. The process. This is a simplified version. I will go into the process of how we do it in the next episode. 1. The mash. The mash is the process by which we extract sugars from the grain. Place all of your grain into the mash tun and then add your water and leave for an hour. The ratio of water to grain, I use 3:1, meaning that for every kilogram of grain there should be 3 litres of water. Therefore, for 5 kilograms of grain you need 15 litres of water. This water needs to be heated to 70 degrees. It actually states that it's between 65 and 68, but if you boil your water to 70 degrees, when you add the water to the grain, it drops by a couple of degrees anyway. Once you have placed all your water onto your grain and given it a mix, replace your lid of the mash tun and then heat a further 20 litres of water for the sparge. Number 2. The sparge. The sparge is the process of draining the mash water off and washing the grain through to extract any sugars left over. The sparge water for washing should be heated to 80 degrees and gently poured over the grain. Stir with a sterile spoon to help shift any stuck sugar. This should fill your fermenter to at least 25 litres. 3. The boil. From here, the wort then needs to be boiled for 1 hour and 15 minutes. This does 2 things. Number 1, it kills off any bacteria within the brew, and 2, it allows us to add hops at various stages to create our flavour profile. The hops. When added to the boil, hops can create bitterness, flavour and aroma depending on where you add them. If you add the hops at the start, they will boil for longer, creating the bitterness for the beer. If you add hops after an hour, with only 15 minutes left, they will add the flavour. And then if you add hops just as you turn the heat off and remove it and begin to cool it, they will add aroma. Hops come in many different varieties, some stronger than others, and they provide a wide array of flavours and scents. You will need to do your research to find out which ones you like. The cool down. We now need to cool the beer as quickly as possible. This stops the beer from becoming hazy. Once the beer cools down to 20 to 22 degrees, the yeast can be added. Yeast. Yeast comes in many different varieties and with different tolerances. Depending on the type of yeast, it can give a higher alcoholic content. It also comes in two main forms, wet yeast and dry yeast. Dry yeast comes as a powder that you sprinkle on, and wet yeast is in liquid form and has to be refrigerated. Now, I've purposely left out the Hydrometer and the Campden tablets for this, simply because it's a little bit more difficult to get your head around. But I will go into this in the next episode. Right, that's it for the basics. Join us in our next episode as we dive into making a milk porter with cherries and berries. Happy brewing, Bozzos!